The history of the English language is shaped not just by the evolution from within, but also by a series of powerful influences from outside. Among the most significant of these influences was the contact between Old English and Old Norse during the Viking Age. From late 8th to the 11th centuries, Viking incursions into England led to prolonged periods of warfare, settlement, and eventually cultural integration. The term Viking broadly refers to the Norse-speaking seafarers from Scandinavia, mostly from modern-day Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, who began raiding the British Isles around 793 AD. This initial phase of violence soon gave way to a more sustained presence. By the mid-9th century, entire armies arrived, not just to raid, but to conquer and settle. Their growing foothold led to the creation of the Danelaw, a region of eastern and northern England under Norse control. Because Old Norse and Old English were both Germanic languages, they shared structural similarities. This mutual understanding led to deep linguistic contact, especially in regions with high population mixing. Over the course of several generations, the interactions between Norse settlers and the Anglo-Saxon communities left lasting linguistic impact. They reshaped the grammar, syntax, vocabulary, and even the very structure of English itself. The Viking presence in England unfolded over nearly 3 centuries, and its linguistic impact was shaped by both violent conquest and peaceful settlement. The first documented Viking attack occurred in 793 AD at Lindisfarne, a monastery on the northeastern coast of England. This event, recorded in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle of the time, marked the beginning of the Viking Age in England. Initial raids were sporadic, but grew in scale and ambition. In 865 AD, a new phase began with the arrival of the Great Heathen Army, a coalition of Norse warriors intent on conquest rather than plunder. Over the next decade, the force moved through the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, capturing major towns like York, Nottingham, and London. Eventually, the Norse forces were confronted by Alfred the Great, King of Wessex. After a decisive battle at Edington in 878, a peace agreement, the Treaty of Wedmore, was signed between Alfred and the Viking leader Guthrum. The treaty led to the establishment of the Danelaw, a large area of England under Norse legal and political influence. Within the Danelaw, Viking settlers established farming communities mixed with the local Anglo-Saxon populations and introduced Scandinavian models of governance, including the Thing. No, not the movie. It basically was a local assembly or court. Place names ending in B, as in Derby, Thorpe, and Thwaite, are linguistic markers of this Norse settlement. Over time, Norse and Anglo-Saxon populations intermarried and coexisted, especially in the north and east of England. Bilingualism became common, and the daily necessity of communication led to mutual adaptation in both language and culture. This created the grounds for widespread and lasting linguistic change. One of the most profound consequences of Norse-English contact was the simplification of English morphology. Morphology refers to the system of word forms and inflections that convey grammatical relationships. In Old English, nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and verbs were highly inflected. Case endings marked functions like subject, object, or possession. Gender and number were grammatically encoded. For example, Old English distinguished between masculine, feminine, and neuter nouns, and used different endings for each case: nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative. The definite article the varied accordingly. s for masculine, seo for feminine, and that for neuter. Sorry for the pronunciation. Old Norse also had a complex inflectional system, but its forms often differed slightly from Old English. In the Danelaw and other contact zones, this created confusion and inconsistency among the speakers. To communicate more effectively, speakers began to rely less on inflectional endings and more on the word order and context. Over time, this led to the loss or reduction of many case endings and the collapse of grammatical gender. Pronoun usage also began to change. The Old English third-person plural pronouns he, her, and him were eventually replaced by the Norse-derived forms they, their, them, which are still in use today. This shift is a clear example of Norse morphological influence. Linguists have long studied the role of language contact in grammatical simplification. In this case, the prolonged bilingualism in Norse-English communities likely drove these changes. Importantly, similar Germanic languages, such as Icelandic or German, retained much of their complex morphology. English, by contrast, became increasingly analytic, depending more on fixed word order than inflection. In addition to grammar, Norse contact had lasting impact on the English vocabulary. Thousands of Old Norse words entered English, and many of them remained part of the core lexicon. These borrowings weren't limited to specialized or cultural terms. Many are everyday words used across all registers of English. These are the examples on screen. These Norse-derived words often coexisted with Old English equivalents before eventually replacing them. For example, the Old English word "niman" was replaced by the Norse word "taka", which means take. In some cases, both versions survived, but developed into different meanings. The Old English craft and Norse strength coexisted, enriching the English vocabulary. Even grammatical function words, like are from Old Norse, eru, found their way into English. The level of borrowing suggests deep and sustained bilingualism, where speakers gradually adopted Norse vocabulary as their own. It also reflects the relatively egalitarian nature of Norse-English contact. Unlike Norman French, which was associated with the ruling elite, Norse was spoken by neighbors, spouses, and trading partners. Beyond words and word forms, Old Norse may have also shaped the English syntax, how sentences are structured. Old English had a relatively flexible word order due to its inflectional system. The subject, verb, and object could appear in various orders without changing its meaning, because the endings clarified grammatical roles. However, in contact zones, the breakdown of inflections forced a reliance on clearer sentence patterns. Over time, English syntax shifted toward a more fixed subject, verb, object word order, which is the standard in modern English today. For example, the Old English phrase "se kening done manslå," which is literally "the king, the man, struck," would be "the king struck the man" in modern English. The shift toward the SVO structure may have been accelerated by Norse influence, since the Old Norse also preferred the SVO structure. Additionally, changes in verb placement, such as the movement of auxiliaries in questions and the use of periphrastic constructions, like do support, align with the developments during the post-Danelaw period. These syntactic changes are more difficult to trace than vocabulary or morphology, but they are supported by analysis of early Middle English text and by comparative studies with other Germanic languages that did not undergo Norse contact. So, the Viking presence in England left a profound mark on the English language. It was not simply a matter of raiders bringing new words, it was a centuries-long process of coexistence, communication, and cultural exchange. From the simplification of grammar to the enrichment of core vocabulary and changes in sentence structure, Old Norse influence helped shape English into the language we speak today. The story of English is the story of contact, and in the case of the Vikings, that contact was transformative. Thank you for watching, and I still don't have an outro. Bye bye.